Listen to the president speaking right now.
It's taking place, wasting time in Washington. And I watched, they don't talk about my conversation. They don't talk about my transcripts. Remember this, when Schiff made up the phony story and he repeated it to Congress and the world, and it was a totally phony story, then I released the transcript. There was supposed to be a second whistleblower. What happened to him? There was, wait, otherwise I won't do your show. Wait. There was supposed to be an informer. What happened to the informer? All of these people disappeared. And when they saw this transcript, they said, we got problems. But they went ahead because they were already there, because they had a phony, concocted story made up. So here's the story. Did nothing wrong. It was a perfect conversation. It was totally appropriate. The best lawyers in the world have looked at it. The Department of Justice has looked at it, given it a sign-off. There was nothing wrong. They never thought I was going to release the conversation. They probably didn't think we had transcribers or we had it transcribed or taped, but they never thought we were going to release it. When we released that conversation, all hell broke out with the Democrats because they say, wait a minute, this is much different than Shifty Schiff told us. So we're doing very well. I got to watch enough. I thought our team did a very good job. But honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
I ask you because your attorneys say it's not. Alan Dershowitz says the framers of the Constitution did not permit impeachment on grounds like abuse of power or obstruction. They object with open-ended vague criteria. So for future presidents, is abuse of power an impeachable offense?
Well, it depends. But if you take a look at this, and from what everybody tells me, all I do is I'm honest. I make great deals. I've made great deals for our country. Now we're working with the WTO. You're probably surprised by that, but there's been a long-term abusive situation to the U.S. I make great deals for our country, and they're honest deals. And when you read that transcription, and by the way, it wasn't one call, it was two calls. Nobody likes to talk about that. There was one call which was perfect, and then there was a second call, I guess a couple of months later, which was perfect. The president of Ukraine said it was perfect. The foreign minister of Ukraine said it was perfect. So if we have a transcription, we have the call, and we have the person on the other side of the call saying it was good. Now, here's the other thing. They got their money long before schedule. They got all their money. What nobody says is very important to me. Why isn't Germany paying? Why isn't UK paying? Why isn't France paying? Why aren't the European nations paying? Why is it always the sucker, United States? That's one. And the other thing I wanted to check very carefully, and it's very important, is corruption. And we do that, too. This was a perfect call. And
all right, Willie, guys, more of the same. We've heard it all before, but it's pretty remarkable. The president declaring is his version of I am not a crook, says, I'm honest. Of course, the count now on verified lies since the beginning of the Trump administration is now over 16,000, according to the Washington Post's fact checker. He says he makes great deals. That speaks for itself. A man who's gone bankrupt time and time again and continues to be mired in North Korean missile deal where he was made to look like a complete fool. He also is interesting. He keeps talking about releasing a transcript. He never released the actual transcript. That's a lie. Said it was a perfect conversation, and the president of Ukraine said it was a perfect conversation. Well, it's very interesting that he's talking about the president of Ukraine and not the 58% of Americans, 58% of Americans who said the president abused his power with that phone call. And 51% of Americans who believe he should be removed from office because of that phone call. And then following up on what Mimi and I were talking about before, about having an attorney general who's not interested in actually enforcing the law, but in being Donald Trump's Roy Cohn. How interesting that he attacks the Democrats' phony concocted story. And then he said, I did nothing wrong. I had the best lawyers in the world look into it, which, of course, is a lie. He has some of the worst lawyers I've ever seen since being sworn in as an attorney about 30 years ago. And he said, and here's the line, I had the DOJ look into it. And they said,
My God.
I did nothing wrong. And there you have the payoff that not just the $30,000 that Barr puts in Donald Trump's pockets for Christmas parties at Trump properties, but there's the big payoff for Donald Trump. He can say he had the DOJ look into it and they said he did nothing wrong, when, of course, Bill Barr is up to his neck in this swampy concoction and will not recuse himself. But that's why.
And it remains extraordinary, Joe, as he says, again, read the transcript. And again, as you point out, bottom page 1 of the document that was released, all caps, caution, a memorandum of a telephone conversation is not a verbatim transcript of a discussion. It's worth repeating that again. But it's remarkable that he believes that summary of the phone call exonerates him. He wants you to go back and read the document that got him into trouble alongside the whistleblower report. He believes read the transcript exonerates him. All you have to do, guys, is watch the evidence that was presented in the well of the Senate and make up your own mind as an American. Just listen to what was presented to you and make up your own mind. The question Kristen Welker put to the president twice that he didn't answer was, is abuse of power an impeachable offense? So, Danny, let me ask you, is abuse of power an impeachable offense?
The Republicans' argument here is that prior impeachments using abuse of power have also been tied to some crime. And that's true. But it's important to know that in Senate trials, you don't have binding precedent the way you do in Article 3 in courts, in the judiciary system. Then it becomes abuse of power is an impeachable offense because it's exactly what the framers envisioned. When they defined high crimes and misdemeanors, they didn't mean strictly crimes. The word high was meant to modify an abuse of official power or a breach of the public trust. And that was echoed in writings by Hamilton not long after and other language interpreting the Constitution. So high crimes and misdemeanors need not be limited to crimes. Now, Alan Dershowitz is going to argue exactly the opposite, that it does require a crime of some kind, but he is in the academic minority. He's got a creative argument. It's in the minority. It really stands that abuse of power is an impeachable offense with or without a crime.
So, Jonathan, we talked about the president's attorney speaking to an audience of one, to the president. It looks, from outward appearances anyway, like the president is happy with what he saw yesterday.
Yeah, that's the initial vibe from the White House people we talked to last night. The president, of course, has been in Switzerland throughout this, but he has been. He wants the robust defense. We know that for this president, facts don't often matter. It's all about the sort of grandstanding and the anger on his behalf. And we saw that yesterday from the White House counsel. There seemed to be real fury even at the Democratic process, as unjust as it was. He has just said, by the way, that he could live either way with witnesses, whether they are a part of the trial or not. But that also brings up, I think, an interesting point. The Washington Post reported yesterday that Senate Democrats are considering making a deal, that they'd be willing to allow Hunter Biden to testify if they could get John Bolton back. Joe, I saw you weigh in on Twitter yesterday suggesting that was a deal you would not take.
Oh, it's a sucker's deal. I mean, what's going to happen is you'll have the Democrat. If the Democrats strike that deal, John Bolton will then come to the Hill. And when it's time for him to testify, the White House will claim executive privilege, and John Bolton will say, I can't speak because of executive privilege. So, yes, I can be here, but I really can't go into any of these topics because they involve national security and would be setting a bad precedent. And the White House lawyers will agree with that. And so the Democrats will get absolutely nothing out of this. I mean, if John Bolton had wanted to testify, he could have come to the House when patriots like Ambassador Yovanovitch and Ambassador Taylor and others came and testified despite the fact the White House told them not to come. Now John Bolton has a book. He's teasing the contents of that book on Twitter, saying, I have a lot to say. Was it seriously?
That's terrible.
What a joke. I have a lot to say, but he wouldn't say it in front of the U.S. House. No, this is a very bad deal, Dave Arrington.